He said it was Thor?
Hey guys, this is Dodger, and you are watching my review of Thor. So I wound up going to the midnight showing of Thor with some friends, and I wrote on my Facebook that I was going to be doing it and asked if anyone would be interested in hearing a review of it, and a lot of people said that they were. So that's what this is. So the way that I'm setting this up, because I know that a lot of people didn't want to know very much about the plot, and didn't want me to talk about that very much, so I'm going to give you guys a very brief summary, and then talk mostly about design elements, about the directing style and the aesthetics and the music and all of that. And then I will give you guys a heads up that I'm going to start talking about the storyline and the plot, so that if you don't want to know about it, you can stop the video. Also, the plot section is going to go into deviations from the comic book, so be aware of that. So for a summary, in the lineup of the Marvel Comics movies that are leading up to the Avengers, Thor is about the god of thunder and son of Odin who, because of his arrogance and his poor judgment at the beginning of the movie, he's stripped of his powers and banished to Earth to learn humility and basically what it means to be a good leader. This movie is entirely based on the Marvel Universe Thor, so anybody who saw it hoping to get a better grasp on the mythology probably didn't. As for directing, everybody was obviously on the same page, which is very good. There's an inclination with comic-based movies to try to take themselves too seriously and be too epic, and they wind up forgetting and leaving behind all of the playful and kind of silly elements that happen in their respective universes. There's a ridiculousness that never really leaves the movie, like even in the fight sequences. Like it feels like a very playful movie. And in that way, it doesn't even try to be a contemporary with Nolan's Batman, which is very good, and the directing is very consistent. Everybody seems, acting-wise, like they are on the same page. As for music, I had a friend once tell me that in terms of sound design, you always want the music or the sound to either completely fog out the rest of your senses and completely just take over, or you want it to be so far in the background that it's supportive, but doesn't draw attention to itself. This movie had very generic, like, fantasy action music that I barely noticed, but in a good way. It was supportive, it was there, and it helped set the scene, but it didn't draw too much attention to itself, and so I think that it absolutely did its job. Now for my favorite part, costumes and props and set design. I love this stuff. So when I first saw the costumes in the trailer, I was like, I know I'm gonna go see this movie, but I'm almost guaranteeing that I'm going to be just watching a costume train wreck happening. Heimdall specifically, when I saw him in the trailer, I was like, this is gonna be so lame. Like, it didn't look like it made any sense. Oddly enough, I wound up being extremely surprised. I really loved all of the Asgardian costumes, a lot, and I felt like the color palette specifically was the way that they evened it out and made it all come together and make sense. And the weapons were gorgeous. I loved the weapons. I especially loved Mjolnir. They felt like very accurate representations of the comic book, specifically Loki and Thor. I thought were very, very well done. Odin obviously was super epic looking. If I were to say actually that anybody stood out super awkwardly, it would be the Warriors 3. But, like, anybody who's read the comic book before and has seen the Warriors 3, they stick out no matter what you do. So I feel like they even pulled them back a little bit and made them less noticeable, which was interesting to me. Even just watching the trailer, the set is obviously gorgeous, and a decent amount of the movie takes place in Asgard, so they really well developed it. Every place that you went in Asgard felt like it made sense and it was all cohesive. Since the Asgard of, like, the Marvel Universe is basically just, like, glowy awesomeness, I felt like they did really well. And a lot of Thor, I mean, takes place in Asgard, like the actual Thor comic book series. So if they plan on making more Thor movies beyond just the Avengers, then it'll be good for them to have a very nice base in terms of, this is the universe that a lot of this is probably going to take place in. And I'll be really upset if they make more Thor movies and they take place on Earth instead, because they have an opportunity to play with more, like, sci-fi fantasy stuff with Thor, so that's a hope for me. From this point on, we are talking about specifically plot. If you don't want to hear anything about that, I'm not going to be giving, like, epic spoilers. I won't tell you how it ends or anything like that, but I will be making comic book comparisons, and I will be delving more into this beginning storyline in general. That's something that you don't want to hear. If you don't want to know any of it, then now is the time to stop the video. Okay, so to expand on the earlier summary, the movie starts with Jane Foster, who has been switched from being a nurse in the comic book to now being an astrophysicist. She's chasing down a storm for her research and runs into a dude that we as the viewer can only assume is Thor. And then they backtrack to Thor being in Asgard and tell us why he's on Earth. So in the backtrack, we're in Asgard and we're seeing Thor about to take his place as the successor to Odin. And it's a huge ceremony and there are Asgardians everywhere and his brother Loki is watching when the ceremony is interrupted because their treasury is being invaded by frost giants. Thor is kind of cocky, very arrogant, goes after the frost giants even though he's told not to, and then has to be saved by Odin. And when he is brought back, Odin is very upset with him, explains to him that he may have caused a war, and strips him of his powers and sends him to Earthrealm. In the comic book universe, Mjolnir is actually cast to Earth because of an apocalyptic event that happens on Asgard, I believe, if I remember right. In the movie universe, Odin actually tosses the hammer after Thor, after inscribing the awesome Mjolnir inscription onto it, and tosses it down to Earth, creates a crater, and because of the inscription and the spell that's been cast on it, no one can wield Mjolnir unless they are worthy of Thor's powers. From there, Loki, his brother, is established as the general bad guy. Thor is on Earth, acting totally insane, and trying to wield Mjolnir but not being able to because he hasn't yet learned his lesson, and the two collide into the general conflict and climax of the movie. So overall, I actually really liked this movie, and I think that the changes that they made to the comic book were necessary changes in order to compact the origin story of Thor. Like I said before, the movie had a really fun, lighthearted feel to it. It wasn't trying to be a Nolan movie by any means. It definitely felt like it was in the same universe as Iron Man, which is good because they're going to collide. So now, here is your second attempt to stop this video if you don't want to hear me pick apart the movie in terms of things that they changed from the comic book. I'm not going to delve too far into it, but it's going to go on long enough that you might be bored. I just want to give you a heads up. So from a comic book reader standpoint, these are going to be the points of contention in terms of ways that they changed the comic book in the movie, and whether or not I felt like they made sense or were necessary changes. In the comic book, Thor is cast out of Asgard, as he is in the movie, but he has his powers and his memories taken away. He is put into the body of Donald Blake, and he becomes a doctor, meets Jane Foster, who is his nurse, and then, through a series of really strange incidents involving aliens, winds up finding Mjolnir, defeating the aliens with the power of Thor, and getting his memories back. Now, obviously, there is a big deviation already, because in the movie, he remembers being Thor. He just has no powers, which is where a lot of the comedy comes from. Now, a lot of people in the community are upset with this change, and upset that Donald Blake didn't actually exist within the movie universe. And they had planned on having him in there, apparently, but it just didn't work out. And I actually think that this was a good call on their part, because they're compacting the entire origin story into one movie, and with Thor's arrogance being the primary conflict in this movie, the best way for him to learn this lesson and progress as a character is for him to immediately have the humbling experience of not having his powers anymore, but knowing what his life was like in Asgard. Donald Blake is actually really awkwardly mentioned, like, once, and, like, 3 of us in the theater chuckled a little bit, and then he just kind of moved on, and it's never mentioned again. It's really funny. So now this gets kind of hairy and weird, because the attraction between Jane Foster and Donald Blake, and the movieverse attraction between Jane Foster and Thor is obviously very, very different. In the comic books, there's a I'm intrigued by Thor, but I'm in love with Donald Blake situation that happens in comic books all the times with mistaken identities and whatnot. But within the movie, because there wasn't any sort of love triangle there, which I'm totally cool with because I hate love triangles, it just wound up making their attraction very strange and almost kind of forced feeling, because she had a I find you interesting because I found you in a storm and hit you with my car, mixed with I think you're kind of pretty. But they didn't have a whole lot of actual, like, progression as characters together. So their attraction felt strange. It's not unbelievable, it just felt a little bit off. Also, they had a great actor playing Loki, but they never took the time to have that progression where they explained why he's the bad guy. They didn't give him a whole lot of good character development, which felt like such a waste because he had a lot of charisma as an actor. And there was a lot of like familial affection between him and Thor originally, and then just it felt like it completely 180'd. Like he suddenly just hated Thor and was jealous of him in a almost like Shakespearean way. I'm hoping that they delve into it more in the Avengers, because he's definitely going to be at least one of the antagonists in the Avengers. So hopefully we get a little bit more of a character development glimpse into that. I'm actually really interested to see how they combine all of these different through lines into one movie. Oh, also, for those of you who stayed after the credits and saw our little Nick Fury snippet that we get at the end of all of these movies, and you were sitting there going, I don't even know what that is. I will give you a link in the description, because there were a couple of different people who were like, do you know what that? So I wound up just finding an article that I've been linking people to. So I'll just link you to that so that you know what that last scene was all about, because I think that that's going to wind up tying to the eventual Avengers movie. Anywho, so I think I'm like 7 tentacles deep in Nerd Kingdom right now, so I'm going to stop and let that be my basic review of Thor. I think I would give Thor an 8 out of 10. And that might surprise you, but I think that it was everything that they wanted it to be. Like, Thor is more the fantasy side of the Avengers, and I think that they definitely captured that. And I think that in terms of the look and the style and the way that they wanted it to be, it was everything that they wanted it to be. And the casting, honestly, was great. So I have no qualms with the actors. I have no qualms with the way that the storyline ended up going, regardless of the deviations that they made from the original text. So I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10. So that's my review that you asked for, and if you liked it, you should let me know, because I would love to do a Green Lantern one. I'm already biased to hate the Green Lantern movie for various reasons, but I would love to do another one of these if you found it interesting. If not, then I will skip it. And that's how I felt about Thor. Feel free to leave a comment or a video response telling me how you liked the movie, whether or not you agree or disagree with me. And otherwise, I will talk to you guys again in the next couple of days. Okay, bye-bye!